Thanks, Nomi, and thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Crystal Fitzsimons, Director of School and Out-of-School Time Programs at FRAC, Mark Bordeaux, Senior Food Service Director at Broome Tioga in New York, and President of New York School Nutrition Association, and Jessica Pino-Goodspeed, Child Nutrition Program Specialist at Hunger Solutions New York, a great panel of CEP experts who can hopefully answer all your remaining community eligibility questions before the August 31st deadline. No question is too basic and all questions are welcome today. But before we do that, I want to give a quick update on the waivers USDA has issued as of today. As you can see on the next slide, USDA has extended several meal waivers through June 30th, 2021 for NSLP, school breakfast, and CACFP, including the non-congregate waiver, meal pattern flexibility, meal service times, parent-guardian pickup. The summer waivers and the after-school activity waivers have not been extended at this time. FRAC and partners are circulating a national, state, and local organization sign-on letter to USDA urging them to extend these waivers. I encourage your organization to sign on by Monday, August 10th, and share with your network. We have almost, as I mentioned, we have almost 1,000 and hope that number continues. While we continue to advocate for the flexibilities and resources needed to ensure students have access to meals during the fall and hope USDA decides to take the approach in the letter, we also need to plan with what we know and have available for this coming school year, and are encouraging school districts across the country to reassess community eligibility and see if it's a financially viable option for the 2021 school year. I believe most of you know the basics of community eligibility and are attending the webinar because you want to dig a little bit deeper, but just in case, I'll do a quick overview. Community eligibility allows high poverty schools and districts to offer breakfast and lunch to all students without collecting applications. Any school district can use this option if at least one of its schools has 40% or more students certified for free meals without an application. Eligibility and reimbursement is based on the percentage of identified students, better known as ISP, in the school or district. Identified students are children certified for free meals without a school meal application, such as kids whose families participate in SNAP or TANF. Any school district can adopt community eligibility if at least one of its schools has an ISP of 40% or more. Districts can implement community eligibility in one school, a group of schools, or district-wide. And as I mentioned before, the deadline to elect community eligibility changed with the nationwide waivers that USDA issued in response to COVID, and the deadline to elect is August 31st this year. There are many benefits to adopting community eligibility, as you can see here, and here are just a few of the many. All students in participating schools have access to free, nutritious, healthy meals without stigma. Parents no longer have to worry about refilling meal accounts, reducing or eliminating the unpaid school meal debt issue altogether. It streamlines meal service operations. Schools no longer have to collect or verify school meal applications and can focus on feeding kids that have traditionally been used to break down barriers to the school breakfast program and to increase participation. I know many school districts that are planning to open this fall are thinking about utilizing these models to serve both breakfast and lunch when they reopen to avoid large numbers of schools gathering in the cafeteria, students gathering in the cafeteria. Next slide. Electing community eligibility requires careful consideration and assessment. It is important to remember here that every school district is different and should do the necessary calculations to determine if community eligibility is a financially viable option. For many eligible school districts, community eligibility is beneficial to student achievement and health, as well as the school nutrition's bottom line, even if your ISP is in the 40s. FRAC has developed a number of tools to help you with the assessment process. The first tool I want to mention is FRAC's new grouping tool that you see here on the screen that can help you maximize the federal funding under community eligibility. The tool is designed to provide strategic groupings for schools in your district to help you plan for adoption. Visit our website, www.fraccep.org, download the template, and add your numbers and start crunching the data. You can tailor the calculator to show groups with a minimum ISP of whatever you want, and it'll provide many different grouping options. As I discussed earlier, there are many options on how school districts can adopt community eligibility, and I urge you to compare the multiple scenarios. Just because you can't adopt district-wide doesn't mean you can't adopt in one or a group of schools. And school districts have done a great job partially implementing CEP with great communications to families, and with all the multiple scenarios that the calculator populates, they'll save to your account, so you can go back and rework the numbers if needed. I also want to share FRAC's new financial calculator tools, and these can really help you determine how CEP might play out financially in your district, and really help you complete a financial analysis to determine what works best for your school district. And so we have a CEP break-even calculator, a CEP district level calculator, and a CEP school level calculator. And these are all worksheets to help you crunch the numbers. You can insert, add in what programs you're planning to operate in the school year. If you are, bringing in after-school meals and thinking about bringing those into your calculations, then you can look at the district and school level and compare, and looking at labor costs, reimbursement rates, et cetera. So definitely take a look at those great financial tools at fraccep.org. And so with that, I just wanted to share, a number of these tools available and give the high-level basics, but really want to turn it over to our experts to give their various perspectives on CEP, and then, of course, really open it up for discussion and have questions. And so please type your questions into the box at the bottom. So now I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Etienne. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. I hope it's a very informative tool for you. My name is Mark Bordell, and I oversee 15 districts in the southern tier of New York. Those 15 districts, we have about enrollment of around 33,000 students. And our districts range from an urban school all the way to an extremely rural district. So we have all gamuts of population. Overall, 63% of our students are free and reduced. We serve about 12,000 breakfasts every day, 19,000 lunches. We have 65 buildings total. Out of those buildings, 24 buildings, we do provision to breakfast. 26 of our buildings are CEP. 3 of them we added brand new this year. And we have a mix. 4 of our districts are 100% CEP. I have one district that only 1 building out of 5 is CEP. I have another district that 1 out of 3 buildings is CEP. And my other district is 5 out of 7 buildings are CEP. Our ISPs are all over the board. I have one ISP. My highest ISP is 69%, and my low is 47.65%. So we've made able to work it from 100% free to 75% free, 25% paid. This year we did something new. This year was the first time that we've actually did 2 separate applications for one district. We did 2 separate groupings. We did one application was for 4 elementary schools, and another application was for 1 elementary school. And we really felt we wanted to get all the elementary schools approved this year, especially, just for the ease of, having to do grab-and-go meals, doing remote feeding and on-site feeding. We felt it was important to do the best we could to have to reduce the amount of money that we take in. So it really worked out well, is that when we did the calculations, when we combined all of it first, we used the tools that were available to us, and when we combined all the buildings at first, we went from 64. Originally, 3 of the buildings were CEP last year. So we wanted to do all 5 CEP this year. So our original ISP was 64% last year. And we tried to combine all 5 elementary schools to figure it out. That ISP went from 64% down to 54%, which we felt was just a little too low and we didn't want to go that far. So when I took out my largest building, which had over 500 students, and went and just calculated 4 buildings, our ISP was 60%, and that was much more of a doable number. So with those 4 buildings, we ended up being 96% free and 4% paid with that 96%. And that left our largest building by itself. And at 47.65%, 76% of our meals are going to be free now, and 24% paid. And when we did all the calculations, our revenue is only going to go down about $10,000. But what we buy and what we get for that is so much well worth it. We really expect our unpaid meal debt to skyrocket this year in most of our districts. We don't have to worry about that now in these five buildings. We don't have to worry about unpaid meal debt. We don't have to worry about meal shaming. It just makes it so much easier. Yes, $10,000 less in revenue if we feed the same amount of kids, but if the unpaid meal debt would have went up, it would have been a wash. Our grab and go meals are going to be so much easier now. We don't have to worry about collecting money. We don't have to worry about exchanging cash at the cash registers. And just the amount of goodwill and making life easier for our parents, our teachers, administrators is just so much worth it to do with that. And again, the most important reason is that we have the opportunity to feed all those kids for free now. So it definitely makes it a lot easier and better for the kids. I really had not one negative feedback from doing CEP. We've been doing CEP now since the beginning. We've had CEP, and it's been tremendous for all of our districts as we've done it. We've slowly increased the amount of buildings every single year, and it's been nothing but positive. We've increased breakfast participation in some of our buildings by 120%. And how we've done that is we've gone from a traditional breakfast to breakfast after the bell. And, you know, when you can do a 120% increase in participation, it's a win. And lunch, we've seen anywhere from an 18 to 25% increase in our districts, higher at the elementary level and a little bit lower at the secondary level, but still, you know, nice increase in participation for lunch as well. We do reapply every single year, no matter what. So that's another nice thing is you can re-up. So this is a 4-year program. Next year, if your numbers still work, reapply again and extend that out a year. And so right now, all of my districts and buildings that are CEP, we've re-upped for next year. So we are good now for all those buildings until 2024. So just a lot of positive. One thing I just want to say is that, you know, it's important for us for the kids. I saw the statistic, which was amazing, and this is probably the #1 reason why we do it, is that schools that do not offer CEP, if you're eligible for CEP and you do not do it, your kids are 2 times more likely to be at risk of hunger and food insecurity than those kids who attend schools that participate in CEP. So if nothing else, do it just to reduce food insecurity in your district. I found that amazing that by doing CEP, you reduce food insecurity by 2 times as much. So with that, I'll be sticking around if you have any questions at all. But if you can find a way to do it, it's worthwhile and it'd be fantastic for your district and your families. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Jessica.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's so great to have a director like Mark in New York State. As an advocate, he is a dream come true to talk about all these great benefits. But ATN and FRAC invited me to share a little bit from an advocate's perspective about our final push towards CEP in this school year. So really, as this final push, and in New York, schools just last week submitted reopening plans to state ed. Our push around CEP has really been focused around that, and CEP putting CEP into context of a year where there's great uncertainty and a lot of operational challenges, with many schools going towards in-person and virtual hybrid models. So really talking about how CEP can help schools continue to provide meals in a way that they did last year. So last year in New York State, many schools had an area eligibility waiver and were able to feed all kids at no cost, regardless of whether they operated CEP or not. So some schools are facing this challenge now, going back to the traditional model of free, reduced, and paid, and trying to feed kids off-site. So we're really pushing to have, especially those schools who saw such benefit from universal meals, and if they're able, to really look in that context of reopening and how that can help. We also put this in the context of many districts faced really increased financial burdens with feeding kids off-site. That came with much more overhead cost, and then also just labor cost as well, to ensure that everyone was remaining safe. So really we have been able to frame CEP as a long-term view, as a way to recover their programs through the years. And also, again, kind of going back to what Mark said, putting more broadly in context of child food insecurity and the rates that we're seeing right now, to really help folks understand. And a lot of schools are already positioned in anti-hunger efforts and in different coalitions in their communities to address food access in their communities, and CEP can be one mechanism to put in place to ensure that access. So what does our outreach look like as advocates statewide in New York? We work to target specific school districts. So we are reaching out to districts who are eligible and not participating, specifically with the stat that Mark mentioned about higher risk of food insecurity in those eligible schools and not participating. We're seeing a ton more schools come in at lower percentages of free and reduced, just to try to get through the door to offer universal meals. We're also really pushing, and got this tip from our state agency. We work closely with our state agency in terms of CEP in New York, really pushing partial school districts to see if they can go district-wide for community eligibility, that they can be creative with grouping, but especially with social distancing and trying to, in some cases, some districts are moving around children. Specifically, the instance that we've seen is a student, for example, who is in a CEP elementary school and moves to a middle or a high school. Their classroom moves in that area to promote social distancing, and so that can cause some confusion. So if you can get those partial school districts who may not have CEP in their middle or high schools to expand in that way, it'll be beneficial and kind of ease those operational challenges to provide all kids meals. We're also doing some broader statewide outreach. It's been a few years since we really engaged in a general push for CEP. We've had CEP in New York State since the 2012-2013 school year. We were a pilot state. So it has been around for a while. However, the audience is new. There's a lot more folks who are finding that their ISPs are higher, have dipped their toe in the water for universal meals during COVID closures. So we're doing a much broader outreach with different other partner organizations. So we're doing, at this point, weekly emails out to schools to let them know that eligibility, that they have still time to apply for CEP, in that the data that they need to use for eligibility, specific in New York State, that data is only available to school districts until the 10th. It is at that point where the state is turning over into the new school year for direct certification data. So we're really pushing schools to pull down that data if they haven't yet. A lot of schools, we know that some of them have not been in their buildings. So we want to make sure that that data is pulled so they can consider at least if they are eligible. We're also trying something a little new, gleaning really from what we're learning from our national partners here, and having a coffee hour roundtable. So we're having a virtual roundtable discussion. This has always been super helpful for districts to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, to hear from some experts, but also to hear from other schools and their experience with implementing. So we are hosting that next week with great hope that we'll have a successful Zoom virtual roundtable to reach some folks and let them get their final questions similar to this about CEP. And some advocacy points in terms of what's helped us kind of move the dial and allow for more time for districts to opt into CEP. Originally, that deadline for direct certification data was earlier in the year, and there was earlier in the month. August 3rd, I think, was the original date. And so the state agency did not announce that date until about the week before. So we were able to meet with them and discuss about the concern there, especially with many new districts new to CEP and not already kind of in the know to be sure to have their finger on the pulse of the direct certification data. So we were able to get the state to extend that deadline for how long that data is available on their website. We've also been able to work hand in hand with them to hear about their concerns about community eligibility. So these are specifically the state agency's concerns around accountability. How can we help arm schools? And part of that was helping expand CEP in districts that are only doing partial CEP implementation. While it's not impossible, we're just trying to help give schools all their possible resources and all the information to help inform them to make a great plan for next year. So really what's helped us move the needle also, we are really active in pandemic EBT outreach. New York State is a little different than other states. Our PEBT benefits, which is an emergency benefit for when schools were closed, to children who receive free and reduced price meals. We're doing a lot of outreach and information. We've included CEP in all of that, regardless of who our audience is. You never know who might be in different areas and might be sitting on a school board or is an influential parent who can help move the dial. So we are keeping that drumbeat of CEP for the coming school year. And also we've tag teamed with different membership organizations. We have a strong relationship with the New York School Nutrition Association, which Mark is our president. And they do a great job communicating to food service directors, but also our Superintendents Association, our Principal School Administrators Association, and our Business Officials Association has been generous to provide all this information about CEP and offer us as a resource to help schools through that process. But with that said, I don't want to take up too much time. I think the question and answer section is so valuable. So I will kick it back over to the folks at BRAC and start the Q&A.
Thanks, Jessica. That was wonderful, and many tips there for advocates as well as school districts about making the final push for community eligibility. I know we have many advocates joining us today, and it's always great to hear what's working and what we can do in the final weeks before the deadline. So I just want to mention a few. I know I had highlighted these before in the presentation, but just to go over again, we have some great community eligibility tools and resources. Our webpage, check it out, tons of stuff on the website, resources that we've developed over the years, as well as our grouping and tool calculators. I know Mark had mentioned, looking at making it work with a lower ISP. He's been successful. We know many other school districts have been successful and have captured that in some best practices. So definitely take a look at that. That includes some great strategies that you can implement to make sure that CEP is successful at a lower ISP. And then on the next slide, are a few of the resources that we've developed for the upcoming school year. We know things look a bit different these days, and so we have a school reopening guidance tracker, and it's all the Child Nutrition Agency resources for fall 2020 by state, and so definitely take a look at that. Some really great resources and tips for implementing programs in the fall. We also have our innovative delivery service models to serve meals when schools reopen. And, we know many all over the country have been doing a great job of implementing breakfast after the bell, and know that a lot of these models will be used for lunch as well. And so, using these tools to have those conversations and assess what you can do in the coming school year, and potentially even for grab and go. I also, the School Nutrition Foundation with funding from the Partners for Breakfast in the Classroom that FRAC is a part of, put together a dining guide for meals in the classroom, and it has a lot of different templates that you can use to engage and build support for these programs and implement successfully with all stakeholders. So definitely take a look at those great resources. And so now I will, I'm going to have Crystal Fitzsimons from FRAC join us for Q&A. And so if you have questions, please type in the box and I will get to them. So now let's to our first question. Jessica, you mentioned there's a big push for school districts to partially implement. My superintendent, our school board are hesitant to implement since we're not able to implement district-wide. Do you have any talking points to get them on board?
Great. So honestly, it usually comes back to the issue of food insecurity and the impact on children. And so FRAC really has some great resources of how specifically the school nutrition programs can support students' health, learning, wellness. And so for us, we really communicate to schools that the all or nothing approach is really problematic in that way, that if one school or a group of schools are eligible, then obviously that need is there. And also providing testimonial from others. I'm not sure what state you're in, but from other schools in the area who are doing partial implementation is really helpful. Clear communication to families can help with any confusion from one school to another within a district. So we have a lot of partial districts doing CEP. And so really, if you can expand district-wide is the ideal circumstance, but again, not impossible to do with partial and definitely worthwhile.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is for Crystal. How does CEP impact Title I funding?
Crystal, you might have to unmute yourself.
I just did. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. So with Title I funding, it doesn't impact the overall, if you implement community eligibility, Title I funding does not impact, it doesn't impact Title I funding for the school district. A lot of school districts use individual schools' levels of free and reduced price students in order to allocate Title I funding. So when community eligibility came out, USDA worked very closely with the U.S. Department of Education to actually develop guidance to give some flexibility to school districts to determine how they were going to allocate Title I funding. And so school districts can decide how they're going to do it. They can use the identified student percentage. They can use the identified student percentage times 1.6. They need to use a comparable measure if they are implementing it not district-wide, but there is quite a bit of flexibility for school districts in determining it. And school districts can even determine that they want to collect an alternative form as well if they feel like that will allow them to more accurately reflect the need among the schools. So there's a lot of flexibility there. We have a piece that explains how it plays out, but school districts can think about the best way to use different measures of student poverty in order to allocate Title I funding among the schools within their district.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Mark. Can I still serve a la carte meals if I adopt community eligibility?
Yeah, absolutely. We still do, and we still, if you have online, to do a la carte sales. So Absolutely. You can do that to increase revenue.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Let's see. The next question is for Crystal. My ISP is better on July 1st than compared to June 30th. Can I use it?
Questions about that? I would encourage you to check in with your state agency and talk to them about it.
That's a great idea. Yes, there are definitely check in with your state agency if you are interested. But like we said before, the deadline to apply is August 31st, and they can definitely field all those questions. The next question is for Mark. I'm currently debating switching to CEP from Provision 2. What are the benefits for making the switch? And what does it look like for your districts?
If you're doing Provision 2 for breakfast and lunch, I would look and compare, and depend what state you are from as well. Here in New York, it was easy to compare because our reduced students are now free. New York State picks up our reduced cost. So just look at your numbers on a monthly basis as far as what your base year is compared to your CEP numbers. So if your CEP percentages for free are higher than your base year for Provision 2, then definitely I would consider switching to CEP. But compare your base year to your ISP number and take your ISP number times 1.6 to see what your total free amount would be, and compare that to your base year. If it's higher, then definitely CEP is the way to go.
Great, thank you. Mark, another question for you. Now that you mentioned that one of your districts has an ISP in the 40s, how did you make that work, and how can I make it work with the upcoming school year with all the different challenges thrown our way?
Well, again, you have to do a budget and see. We looked at a couple of factors. One is we looked at potential unpaid meals, especially this year coming up. And we have in New York State a shaming policy, which we don't like the word shaming policy, but that's what New York State called it. And we really felt strongly that we had a lot of families in need, and that we would have a tremendous amount of families coming to our grab-and-go sites for the remote kids and asking for a meal but not have money for it. So we really thought that there's going to be a tremendous increase in unpaid meal debt. So we factored that in as a major factor in our decision. And then because this is only one building and the rest of the buildings were still staying either a different CEP number or being full paid, it weighed out. And in the end, when we calculated, it was only be like a $10,000 loss for the year. And we felt that we could absorb that loss in our budget. And the district supported and said, yes, for $10,000, if need be, we will kick that money in. So talk to your superintendent. And I think if you share with them all the positive benefits of doing this for the child, for the district, I think they would absolutely go for it.
Great, thank you. And one more question for Mark. Did you have to hire more staff or purchase any new equipment when you adopted CEP? What were the changes to your operation?
The only changes is if we change serving models. So if we change from a traditional serving line breakfast model to breakfast in the classroom, then yes, we would hire some more staff to help with that, along with any equipment you need for breakfast in the classroom, whether it be tote bags or more carts. So it depends on what we did. But if we didn't change serving models, then no, we didn't do any other changes. We would, we might add an hour or two here or there, but unless we change our delivery method, we do not have to hire extra staff.
Great. Another question for Crystal. What if the additional waivers come through? Should I still be working to adopt CEP this year?
Hi, yes. We do not know if the waivers are going to come through. And, you know, a lot of people on this call also may have shifts in how their schools operate in the upcoming school year as you get closer to the start of the school year. We are working and focused on making sure that if people are eligible and interested and it's feasible, that they come into community eligibility. If it turns out that waivers are granted so that schools can operate under the summer food service program or the seamless summer option, then that would be wonderful. If there's legislative movement to offer free meals to all students, that would be great as well. But at this point, none of those things have happened, and so we need to move forward, and school districts should really move forward under what we understand is going to be allowable for the upcoming school year, and right now that is community eligibility.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. And I also want to flag, too, that this, once you, when you adopt CEP, you are locked into that rate for 4 years, too. So it is also thinking about the next 4. So do want to flag that. Okay, well, those are all the, oh, yes.
Oh, I did just want to, just to follow up with the 4-year piece, school districts can, so if the economic crisis continues and people's school districts' ISPs go up over the school year, school districts can redo their ISP each year if they choose to. But if they don't want to redo it, schools can lock in the ISP for 4 years. So just something to think about and keep in mind as well, because I think there are some predictions out there that the economic crisis is going to get worse before it gets better, and schools would be able to update their ISP next year if they adopt it this year and want to continue.
Great, thank you. So there are a few more questions in the chat box, but these do look like they are state-specific questions. So we will answer those offline and follow up. We will so just do want to flag that that we will be following up with you individually, because we know that especially when it comes to how CEP interacts with education funding, that does vary state by state. So we will follow up with those questions, but just want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you to our panel for sharing your insights as we make this last push to get many more schools to adopt community eligibility in the next few weeks with the additional time and flexibility that we have. And so really thank you all for joining us and for your advocacy and all your efforts over the past few months to ensure children have access to meals. And at FRAC, you know, if you do have follow-up questions on the tools I mentioned or any other questions on CEP, we're happy to help you offline and work through the calculators and provide any technical assistance that you need. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope you'll join us for our next webinar in the next few weeks, and we'll send that out in the follow-up email as well. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.